Welcome to the Dr. Bergson's Best Health Radio Show. You know, I've been in healthcare long enough to know that there's trends of things. So a few decades ago, everybody had candida. And now people have mast cell issues and histamine issues. There's trends of our knowledge base of health and, of course, alternative health. And it's the same way with nutrients. Vitamin E, it used to be really a major deal. There were two medical doctors out of California that discovered some substance in vegetables that help bring pregnancy or fetus to fruition, and they named it vitamin E. And so vitamin E was really hot when it first got discovered, but it's not so sexy anymore. But should it be? And there is a family of vitamin E components. And we have on the show today a pharmacist who is one of the world's experts on vitamin E and its application clinically. We're going to hear all kinds of things. For example, a special form of vitamin E and its use as adjunctive nutritional care in hormonally driven cancers, even like ovarian cancer. So just to give you a little bit of a snapshot, vitamin E is a family of 8 separate but very related. That's why they're called a family. They're related molecules, kind of like a mother and uncle, a son. And 4 of them are 4 tocopherols, delta, gamma, alpha, and beta, and 4 are 4 tocotrienols. And that is the emphasis, tocotrienols, delta, gamma, alpha, and beta. And we have on the show today one of the world's experts on tocotrienols. In fact, it all comes from a story of an Amazon annatto plant that gives color to things. Estee Lauder used some of the tocotrienols for their lipsticks and their lip products. So it's a very interesting tale, and we're going to hear about it from Dr. Barrie Tan. He is hailed as a trailblazer and the world's foremost expert on vitamin E, especially this other set of relatives of it, the tocotrienols. And he's discovered that there are 3 major natural sources that we're going to hear about: palm, rice, and annatto. And the big deal is this annatto, which we sell a little book that he's written at the clinic at the Naples Center for Functional Medicine. And we also utilize annatto E300, a new form of vitamin E, especially for patients that we work with who have a history of hormonally driven cancers. So Dr. Tan, and I'm going to call him Barrie or Dr. Barrie, earned his Ph.D. in biochemistry from the University of Otago in New Zealand. In New Zealand, one of the most beautiful places on the planet that seemed to really have their act together with COVID, didn't they? Mm-hmm. And then he spent several years as a professor at the University of Massachusetts. And in fact, today, I'm here in Austin, Texas, and Dr. Tan, who's rather adorable, is sitting in Massachusetts himself. So his research focuses on annatto-E. And then if we have time, we're also going to discuss a little bit of his new research, which is on lipid-soluble nutrients that reduce or slow down chronic health conditions. You know, that's the deal. You get stuck or Velcroed to a chronic health condition. And when you find new tools for your tool bag, it's always such an exciting deal because sometimes they make the world of difference for you. So welcome to the show, Dr. Tan.
And thank you, Dr. Bergson. Your description is so wonderful. So this is great. So I'm looking forward to this.
So why don't you tell us how you began on this journey? Because this is an Amazonian plant that you focused in on. So how in the heck did you bump into this Amazonian plant? And how did this unfold?
Yeah, well, it started with my career as a professor in the University of Massachusetts in chemistry, biochemistry, and later in food science. And during that time, I was looking for anything that protect the vegetable oil from going rancid, because food scientists are interested in that, because the consumer want their food to be good. And then I started it with palm at the time, in early 1980s, and I did not have any political thing about palm being saturated fat and then they slash and burn and like that. I'm simply just doing the science. And then and palm oil, as most of us know, are very orangey color. So I have to remove the vegetable oil, remove the carotene, and then I still have something like 0.5% in the bottom. I didn't know what it was. So I did some work and found,
the carotene is the color, right?
Yeah,
you remove the carotene, it gives it its color, the carotenoids.
Yes. So those were the carotenoid colors in palm oil almost make it look like carrot, same kind of carotene. But then I figured out that the Malaysian industry removed the color. I said, wow, these are good stuff to remove. So I got sucked into doing the research on this. So I did spend a fair bit of my time doing the carotene type research. But when I removed the oil and removed the carotene for which I was studying, I saw this small amount of things have high antioxidant. I reported it to the people that fund the research and said, oh, this is just vitamin E. So I then assumed it was, but when I did more research work, I found several different components, only one of which is the normal vitamin E. That was my first taste of defining tocotrienol. I did that for some 10
years. The right
years.
pronunciation is tocotrienol.
Tocotrienol, and it's very simple. This is a tocopherol molecule. This is an antioxidant head. If you look at here, sorry for doing this, it's got one double bond here, two double bond here, and a three double bond here, and then hence triene. That's it. If you remove the double bond, this would be a tocopherol. So the molecule is analogous to a tocopherol except for the three double bond. So that was it. So that was in
Are you the first person to discover this, tocotrienol?
Not the first person. It was first discovered in 1960s, in the 1964-65, and it was so similar to tocopherol, they actually call it, the normal tocopherol is, there's 4 Greek letters, alpha, beta, delta, and gamma. So then if you look at old literature, they have other Greek words like nu, epsilon, and zeta. So those tocopherol are actually tocotrienol, but they were just misidentified in earlier days. And the Merck index continued to propagate that understanding until 2001 before they stopped calling it nu, epsilon, and zeta tocopherol and properly refer them to alpha, beta, delta, and gamma tocotrienol. You can see it's just kind of a thing. Fortunately, it was not stillborn, pardon the image on that, but it was a Johnny come lately because it simply was misidentified before. Anyway, my entry into it was in 1983. Thanks to a researcher at the University of Wisconsin at the time, they were extracting it from barley, totally different. And then they gave it to hypercholesterolemic pigs.
From barley, from the grain barley. And they gave it to pigs that they raised to have high cholesterol.
Yes. And then now barley had very little oil that this material is, but they did that. And then they gave it, and lo and behold, the cholesterol dropped precipitously. So now they have to find a pin in the haystack. And then when they found the pin, it actually was a tocotrienol molecule. Now, that was a very significant finding, albeit in a place that doesn't contain a lot of tocotrienol. So at least the molecule was identified. And then at the time, I was studying palm oil, and I know, palm oil have lots of this material. So I contacted the professor. We stay friends up to this day. That was almost 40 years ago. So we did that, and I persisted on it.
Wait. I got to ask you one question. I wonder why you persisted, because you say in your book, the 2 love affairs of your life are your wife. And now I've been mispronouncing this word for years. So I'm going to have to look at my notes here. So the 2 love affairs of your life are your wife and tocotrienol. So how did that happen that you decided to dive into it? How was that your fire was lit?
At the time in the palm oil, I was actually studying carotene. And if in the 1980s, the carotene study was hot. This is before astaxanthin and before lutein and zeaxanthin for the eye. But beta carotene.
So he was just
and like
talking about the pigments. He was
the
talking
pigment,
about
yeah. And then
astaxanthin and
that,
lutein, the pigments that we know are healthy, right?
yes, I was going after that. And then when I extracted and found out that these tocotrienol have so high antioxidant thing, I decided that, hey, let me check this out. And when I did, at the time, I was studying lymphoma. And I said, wow, it really stifle and kill the cancer lymphoma. I said, wait a minute. This thing
Was this
that
in
is
an
just
animal model or was it
in animal model, at the time in animal model. So, and then when
So
I
you
found out,
animals raised to have lymphoma, you gave it tocotrienols,
yeah,
and then the cancer would go into remission?
yes, and now to help that also that you have spent time to say the word tocotrienol, just call it T3 for now.
Okay,
T
because I'm
and
having
T3,
trouble here. Okay, thank
and
you
just call
so
it
much. You
T3.
just saved me.
And so when we did that, and then it helped, then I decided that, I may change my course slightly differently. So I did that, and then I'll tell you why I left palm oil, palm tocotrienol. First, I discovered it's a lot, and then I told my colleague who discovered it from Bali. He did a lot of work on it.
The country Bali, is that what you mean?
No. The plant barley.
Barley. Okay, sorry. I heard that. Okay, gotcha.
And so he got this from palm, and then he continued to graduate this from animal study to clinical trial. So the original clinical trials were all done on hypercholesterolemia because fortunate to him, sometimes the stars have to line up in the right places. At the time, he had a PhD student who, when he finished his PhD, lo and behold, he became the vice president of a Bristol Myers Squibb, the pharmaceutical company, and they were developing the early stages of a statin drug. Remember, this is 1980s, and
right.
he came, and if you know, Bristol Myers Squibb came up with the only water-soluble statin called provastatin. But the very first statin ever known is Mevacor. They are lipid soluble. But anyway, this guy did that. So he did his PhD work. So he wanted to continue. And since he is a rising star in Bristol Myers Squibb, and this is his professor in University of Wisconsin, so he gave him probably $5 to $10 million. And that went a long way to explain the mechanism, how the tocotrienol work, all this. And I benefited from it. I studied the work. I said, oh my God, there is something here with this tocotrienol. And I was a young assistant professor in University of Massachusetts. So therefore, I decided that I should make a left turn, park my carotene work for a while, the color of life, and then make a left turn to study tocotrienol. That's what I did. I make a left turn. I work with palm, and then the brakes stop on me on palm. I'll tell you why. Professor Qureshi did the work. He did clinical trial. Of 5 clinical trials he did, 3 of them worked to reduce cholesterol. 2 or even 2.5 of them didn't. Then he said, well, that's not good. It's kind of like half-half. So he said, let me stop this. And that cost him almost 5 to 7 years of his life. But he stopped. He stopped because he had to go back to the drawing board to go back on animal study. What is the matter that it does not consistently lower cholesterol?
Consistently.
And it didn't. And this
but
will
the
tell you.
Question, the barley research consistently lowered cholesterol in your friend's data. Was that accurate?
Yes, that consistently lower cholesterol because that only contained tocotrienol. At the time, he didn't know that. In the palm oil has about 25% tocopherol and about 75% tocotrienol.
But the barley had all T3.
Yes, and at the time, who would have guessed that the tocopherol it's just innocuous. It's an antioxidant part of the vitamin E family. So when people did this, it was not standardized. Whatever the alpha tocopherol, there is fine because remember 1980, people were studying cardiovascular health, cancer, the Harvard study, all this. So anyway, when it didn't, he went back on animal study. He had a seminal paper published in Journal of Nutrition in 1997, pretty early, where he did this. It's a very spiffy work. He put in tocotrienol to study, and then in another group, he put in tocopherol. So they are mutually exclusive because of different groups.
The two different family members of the vitamin E family.
Yes. And then he didn't stop there. He did a third group. Now, this group is decisive. He make a mixture of tocopherol and tocotrienol together. So now on the tocotrienol, it worked to lower cholesterol. On the tocopherol, nothing happened. Maybe increase a bit. But then in the one that is tocopherol and tocotrienol, if it reduced tocopherol by 30%, with the tocopherol added back, it reduced by 15%. And then he had a fourth group. He added even more tocopherol. And then it completely negates the ability of the tocotrienol to lower cholesterol. So for the first time, he found that alpha tocopherol interfere with the function of tocotrienol.
So if you're taking a combination vitamin E product and you want to have the T3 with the tocopherols, it would negate the heart protective action or the cholesterol balancing activity
of the tocotrienol. Now, I spend the rest of the 20 years explaining to people, and I don't mind doing that because I have the patience and the zen to explain to a customer and scientists alike. Oftentimes, there's an edict out there saying that if you can make one substance, which is kind of like pharmaceutical type thing, then you attack it and then something severely is addressed. But in the world of plant, they make a whole host of carotene, a whole host of vitamin E, a whole host of phenolics, and the combination is supposed to be synergistic and do better.
What you're saying is in science with our mesmerization with randomized trials, we only test one constituent. And pharmaceuticals can get a patent. It's usually one constituent, one active that the human body's never seen before. But in nature, it's a rainbow, a tapestry of many things in there. So the pharmaceutical approach is very diverse from the natural isness.
That is true. So I know that is very ingrained and that is correct. But I only want to say this. For most part of the time in the plant kingdom, when they make a whole plethora of chemicals, they are synergistic. They are, but however, in the rare few moments, they can be antagonistic. And this is one example. It did not work out that the alpha tocopherol being there, the 1 + 1 could be greater than 2. This is the first time we discovered that 1 + 1 actually is less than 2. So when it is, then it's antagonist. It doesn't usually do that, but this one it did. In case your audience is kind of like, no, I don't believe Dr. Tan. I'm fine with people not believing me. I'll give you another example. It's not well known, but I give you. Beta carotene, because remember, I'm a carotenoid chemist. Beta carotene is known for the longest time, good for eyesight, vitamin A, and all this wonderful thing. And then in the years subsequent to that, in the last 20 years, people heard about astaxanthin, lycopene, zeaxanthin, and all this, and lutein, good for the eye. And I do not sell carotene, so I don't have anything other than I know the science. If you take lutein and astaxanthin, which are good things, with beta carotene would interfere with the absorption of lutein and astaxanthin. That's another antagonism example.
That is huge. Does this have any, so everyone got excited a number of decades ago about beta carotene. And then the epidemiologic studies started to show that if you took beta carotene and you were a smoker, that this increased your risk of getting lung cancer. So people got, whoa. Does that have anything to do with what you're talking about? The underlying mechanism?
At the time, they weren't studying any lutein and zeaxanthin, other thing. But in the beta carotene thing, I think the theory was that when people who are smoker and they take beta carotene, and beta carotene is, in point of fact, beta carotene is a true hydrocarbon. Now, don't get freaked out now. Hydrocarbon is what we put in the gas, hexane, octane, the hydrocarbon, but they're just simply containing hydrogen and carbon. And beta carotene is an old chemical caused by fossil fuel thing. If you look at fossil fuel when they first come out, they look orangey color. They have this kind of thing. And beta carotene is a pure hydrocarbon. And so is lycopene. You Google sometime, lycopene, beta carotene, they're pure hydrocarbon. They are all fossil fuel thing, but the plant makes them too. The beautiful color in tomato, carrots, and all that. But so when we smoke, the oxidative material in smoke see a hydrocarbon like beta carotene and lycopene, it will severely oxidize it. And somehow the oxidized part of this beta carotene and lycopene cause damage in the lung. You see?
I've been wanting to know this for so long. You just gave me this huge aha. That is like a pearl. That's amazing. So I want to go further, but I just have one other question before I forget. So if your friend found out that the T3, that other form of vitamin E that's not so well known in barley consistently lowered cholesterol, and then he went to work for a statin company, why didn't they look once you could do in 2004, the FDA said you could do combination constituents. That they wrote a paper and they changed their stance a little bit. I know because I worked with a group trying to invent a drug utilizing that new regulatory action by the FDA. Why didn't he try and add that to the cholesterol lowering statins or use it in some way at Bristol Myers?
That is a very good question. I think at the time he was making, he could make that left turn, but I think he took the right turn. I tell you how he did that. At the time they were studying pravastatin. And pravastatin, like most other cholesterol reducing drug, they can reduce the cholesterol 30 to 50%. And the tocotrienol is a vitamin E, my goodness, and it could reduce the cholesterol typically in hypercholesterolemic subject about 15 to 20%. So it was not going to be a billion-dollar drug. So they abandoned it. So when they abandoned it, and I'm okay, I can pick up the drips and drabs on the side. So I was a young assistant professor, so I got to study it. So I did that. Never in a million years was I thinking someday I was going to go out in commerce and make it out. I was just doing research, and I did. And then taking what Dr. Qureshi said, and then he said that palm oil have too much alpha tocopherol, didn't work. So I just said, I need to take a break on this. So because by that time, I almost studied tocotrienol for 15 years. And then I was still in my late 20s and 30s. I need to have a break because a chunk of my time or my life have just given to so much on tocotrienol. And then I told my wife that I have to go back to not my first love in life, to my first love in science, to go back to study carotene. And at the time, there was a well-known ophthalmologist at Harvard. Her name is Johanna Seddon. And she was the first, now it's commonplace. She was
How do you spell that, her last name?
Seddon.
Thank you.
Johanna Seddon. And I don't know if she's still in Harvard, but she was. And she was the one that studied the retina of the eye, flanking from the macular eye and flanking out. It was loaded with lutein and zeaxanthin. You'll know exactly where I'm going with it. This is in the 1990s. People don't know much about it. Today is all over the map. Good for the retinal, blue screen, and also for macular degeneration, elderly like that. So I just thought, okay, I'm going to make a switch in my research. I'm going to look for the world giant, large marigold plant where the petals, I can extract lutein and zeaxanthin. Now everybody knows to do that. So I flew to South America. I'm telling you a fate in my life. I flew to South America looking for the giant marigold plant so that I can get to this carotene called lutein and zeaxanthin for the eye and park the tocotrienol aside. I did. I found a giant plant, and that picture is in the book there. And believe it or not, literally 20 feet away from me, I saw the annatto plant. And then I was curious.
The annatto plant, Annatto.
Oh,
The
okay.
annatto plant. This is all about the annatto plant. So you got to get this word right. And look at this plant. This plant, he's got pictures. If you're going to watch this on YouTube.
So you can see this. This is so beautiful. And the British named this the lipstick plant. Is simply annatto plant. If you want to see this in botanical garden, let me tell you 2 or 3, you can see it. You can see this, surprisingly, inside the Bronx Botanical Garden. But it's inside. It will just freeze to death if it's outside. In the Tampa Botanical Garden, and somewhere in San Diego and LA, and quite a fair bit in botanical gardens in Florida. It needs to have warmer climate. And you see this? I saw the pot open, and then the beautiful color. Then I said, wow, that beautiful color sure looked like a carotene. And sure enough, the big sin is a carotene. And then my mind flashed back. Again, this thing looked like a hydrocarbon. And then the sunshine on it, oxygen, is going to decompose no time. But then the color did not decompose. Then I said, wait a minute. There got to be something that is protecting the color. And the plant is not telling me. They don't speak. They don't have a heart. They don't have a soul. They just, you have to figure it out. Then I said, I think I'm going to figure it out. Just to let you know that this is an Amazonia plant. I have another plant I took from the Tampa Botanical Garden. See the seed here, and then the tiny frog here. The whole frog is about the size of a dime. So this is an Amazonian tree frog. If you Google Amazonian tree frog, it was first discovered. This frog always stay up on the tree, never come down to the water. And that's why they discovered the frog is so small, they just swim from side to side. Anyway, that is just to show you that plant come from Amazonia, even though I took the picture in Tampa. So I found out, I brought that was in 1998, 99. Remember, I went there to look for lutein, zeaxanthin, marigold, and I came back with annatto, not knowing why I came back with it, probably some carotene.
So you just saw this plant near the marigold flower that you were searching for, and it caught your eye, and you wondered why the red color wasn't dimming, and you thought there must be something protective, so you took it back home to you in Massachusetts.
Yes, and then I analyzed it. And then when I analyzed it, I was just shocked beyond words. And when I did that, I said, my God. And I was expecting it to be some polyphenolics. They're antioxidant, but it was not. And then I found out that first, I'll make 3 statements. First, there is no tocopherol, 1. And 2, it only contains tocotrienol. It is true. I will vouchsafe it hundreds of, we have analyzed it thousands of times now, never change. No tocopherol, only tocotrienol, and wait till you hear the third one. It contains the 2 most potent vitamin E tocotrienol the earth has ever made, and it's delta tocotrienol and gamma tocotrienol. I knew at that time my fate was sealed. I never expect to go back like this. This is so serendipitous. And so I told my wife, I said, I got to work on this, and I did. So to tell you the last 20 years, we figured it out. And my wife is not a chemist, but she'll come in and she'll say something. So at one point, I tried to do that in the lab. I figured out how to extract them. And then she's a lover and hugger of Whole Food stores, stuff like that. As many women do. Then I said, Barrie, you're not going to use any solvent to extract this, right? Because you took so much time to trouble on doing this. You must find a way to do this that is good, healthy, and wholesome for people. Then I said, you just made a request. It's going to take me many years to figure out. So it took me another 5 to 10 years. So today, I'm
God bless your wife. God bless your wife. And I have to say, when your staff was first setting up the sound and lighting and everything like that, and the pictures of the annatto plant were behind you, I have to say, opened up, it looks a lot like a vagina. I mean, have you heard that? I mean, doesn't it?
Nobody.
It looks just like a vagina.
I'm happy
Giving
that you
birth
said
to
it
this
and I
information, this healing information. Anyway, now people are going to want to go to the YouTube and see this visual. You better go. Hold that up just one more time. Could you do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which one? The one with the frog or without the frog? The one with
that one right there. That looks just like a vagina, and it's given birth to the most potent T3. Wow.
Paltrow.
So how did you then discover the clinical uses of T3 in patients, and how did you link it up to being an adjunctive tool in ovarian cancer, for example?
Yeah. Now, at the time, we had a lot of animal studies, only a few studies on the hypercholesterolemia thing. And then we went back to the hypercholesterolemia study without the tocopherol. It worked again. So we did that. And then we did study people with metabolic syndrome. And today, to make it short, because it's so many years in between, so we have done clinical trials on chronic conditions. I'll get to the cancer thing. I know I'll put that last. It is the best indicator. I'll put it last. But the general thing is tocotrienol is particularly good for chronic condition. And we have done clinical trials. I'll be happy to send you any of these clinical trials if you wish on hypercholesterolemia, metabolic syndrome, meaning people have type 2 diabetes, meaning pre-diabetes. And we decided that since they work on all those, let's directly study. Right now is an onslaught of tsunami coming of people who have fatty liver disease called NAFLD, non-alcohol fatty liver disease. And if they're severe, then become NASH. So these are all chronic conditions like that. And my colleague, a woman professor in Texas, she persuaded me, Barrie, why don't we study postmenopausal women with osteopenia before they become osteoporosis, as well as postmenopausal women who are obese. So
it sounds like this acts on the PPAR gamma receptor, the insulin receptor. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. That's one.
Wow.
And we also Dr. Bergson, we also studied this on C-reactive protein, severely drop the inflation. We
really?
studied and many, and they're all clinical.
What a helpful thing to know as a tool clinically.
Yeah,
okay.
And then so we did all of this, and right now we're not going to do much more tocotrienol research because we have a 3-month study on fatty liver disease, 6-month study, and now we're finally doing a 12-month study with CAT scan or ultrasound. If we see this dramatic improvement in the liver, then I think we got it. And God willing, we can ask the FDA for a structure function claim because of this huge effort we invested on this. So that's the tocotrienol.
So let me just ask you, in your early studies where it's been successful, what was the dosage that you use? You know, we do now have an epidemic of fatty liver disease, and right. It's highly linked to issues in the gut because the bloodstream, the venous blood vessel goes right from the gut to the liver. But we're seeing an increase in fatty liver in even the most surprising demographics. In young children, pediatrics, there's a big increase in fatty liver. Polycystic ovarian syndrome, young women have an increase. So fatty liver is an issue that's on the increase. And the more you have fatty liver, the more you have insulin resistance, the more you can't lose weight, the more you're ill. The liver has a temperature of almost 105 degrees. It has to do so many job descriptions. And when it's chock full of fat, it's like people not wanting to go to work after the pandemic. Your liver no longer wants to go to work. It wants to stay home and just do video games, and it doesn't want to work. So can you say how quickly that reversed it and what was the dosage that you used?
Okay. I like the fact you said, I think the liver performed no less than 700 functions. So that is very, very important. In all the clinical study we did, we use dosages at somewhere between 300, as low as 200, all the way to 600. On the fatty liver disease, we use 600, And on the type 2 diabetes, 250. And most of the time is somewhere between that area.
Was that once a day or several times a day? Because your capsules now that you make available commercially are 300 milligrams.
Yes. Once a day, if it's 600 milligrams, then twice a day. Only remember to take it with a meal because it's oil soluble, lunch or dinner or something like that. And then duration, almost all the studies, we did it anywhere from 2 months upwards to 6 months. We only are doing the NAFLD study, fatty liver study, for 12 months to nail it so that we have a time dependent. It works after 3 months, works after 6 months, and work after 12 months, and then we have data points on it. But it already worked after 3 months. So I would say that probably for cholesterol lowering, 1 month you can see result. For most other things, 2 to 3 months is good. But fatty liver, the liver is a big organ, so we decided to push it to 12 months. By the way, at 6 months, these fatty liver people who are overweight, not obese, they actually lost about 10 to 15 pounds. Now, we were not looking for weight loss, but they lost weight. But for people
and you didn't do any dietary changes. You didn't do anything else except give them this specific nutraceutical from the Annatto plant that you've isolated, and they did no other changes, but they shed 10 to 15 pounds.
They did what we advised them to follow the American Heart Association diet one, not the most severe one, which means that control the amount of cholesterol you take. And then I forgot, keep your calorie intake to, I've forgotten the exact number, 2,000 or less than 2,000.
So there was a little bit of a dietary intervention along with it. Okay.
And then encourage them to do some exercise like that. So that would be the type 2 diabetes thing. We didn't do much of that. And the type 2 diabetes thing, we were monitoring, did that lower their sugar? Did that lower the HOMA's score, which is an insulin sensitivity function of the of the insulin, and all that work. So because in diabetes, you want to see if the insulin continue to function well, or continued with dysfunctional. So it improve its functionality of the insulin. So that was very pleasing to me.
So did you do this in type 1 diabetics?
No, we did not do type 1 diabetes, but right now we have an ongoing, almost finished study of pre-diabetes. So for people who have moderately high sugar, but not yet hit the mark of type 2 diabetes. So this is the cluster, what I call the cluster of metabolic syndrome, which is people who are chronic condition. Now, the obesity one is very interesting. I'm just holding my breath. This is done in Texas. So these are clearly people having to carry a lot of weight. They're postmenopausal women. They're not otherwise diabetic. They're not otherwise having fatty liver disease. It's simply that they are obese. So right now we have adipose tissue biopsies. So we'll study how active can we silence the inflammation on the adipose tissue so it would not cause whole body inflammation. So I'm holding this. Oh, by the way, we are also...
So are you measuring like pro-inflammatory cytokines in the fat biopsy? Is that what you're doing?
Yes, inflammatory. So this is a first of a kind. So nobody had done this. So
this is so cool. This is so cool. I'm trying to maintain all my chakras, trying to be cool. But this is amazing. I didn't know that our conversation, which all of you get to listen in on, and if you love conversations like this, don't forget, I have a membership now where I'm in constant dialogue with physicians, with smart patients. You can go to drlindseyberkson.com/membership, and we continue some of these dialogues. And you never know what comes out of a dialogue with motivated, smart people. Look at what we are learning with our conversation with Dr. Tan. Wow.
Awesome. Thank you. I know. I thought that we will, if we even have 5 minutes in the end to talk about the new thing I'm studying is good. But I love this because once I know that this, look, I spent 30 years doing this. So it is no way to make money fast, but I'm so passionate about it. If it works, it is fantastic joy to see somebody getting better. Wait until I tell you about the cancer thing. I know I'm going to go there. So we did all of these things here on the cytokine thing. And then the scientists in Texas decided to do, because the postmenopausal women he studied could be taking antibiotic, because they're overweight and obese, probably it affect the microbiome. She came up with it and in its entirety. So she said, Barrie, I'm going
Who's
to
she?
see.
I'm sorry, I got lost.
Her last name is Shen, a Chinese professor, Leslie Shen. And
Okay,
she's
so
the one
another
that studied.
a co-worker. Okay,
Okay.
pro-scientist.
She's the one that studied the osteopenia and now currently studying the obesity study. So she said that I'm going to study how the tocotrienol may or may not help to improve the microbiome. So therefore, she is able to get excretory material to study this. So right now, she's writing a paper on how this correct the microbiome of women who are osteopenic. So she's writing that now.
Oh, that is so interesting.
And then currently in the obesity study, I am very sure people who are obese, the microbiome is out of kilter. So we already done animal study, it corrects the animal microbiota. It's well known like that.
So in animal models that are genetically raised to be obese, when you give them T3 from the annatto plant, do they shed weight?
And yes, they shed. We did not even genetically manipulate. We decided to just give them dietary weight to have them put on weight. So which is more accurate than a genetically manipulated.
Okay, so they were allowed to eat ad libitum as much as they wanted.
Yes. So this is good. This is very good. But let me, if you want to come back, I could. I wanted to tell about the cancer part. So in the middle of doing all of this in the animal study, I cannot get away from the published area in the PubMed. There are about every 100 paper published on chronic conditions, like I mentioned to you now, there are about 200 to 300 papers published on cancer. This was about 10 years ago. So I was just troubled within my soul. I just said that, people publish all this work and look so positive about cancer, but no one in the donkey world is studying a clinical trial on it. So I decided that I have to do clinical trial. My company is small and this is so time consuming, cost consumption. Then I found out that there was a professor, sometimes the stars just line up, and he's a chief oncologist in one of the hospital, University of Southern Denmark. He had done he's about 10, 15 years older than me, many years of doing clinical trials, mostly on pharmaceutical. I sent in the papers and then he called me back and said, Barrie, we are going to conduct 5-6 clinical trials on it. I just fell off my chair. I said, I don't have that kind of means financially to support maybe one study. He said that, did I ask you for money? He said, no, you didn't. He said that. So he got grant from the Danish government. Can you imagine that? So right now,
I tell you, the Netherlands is quite extraordinary. I look to them for a lot of things, and boy, this is pretty exciting to hear. So you just reached out to him, you showed him your research, and he said, we're going to get a grant from our government to test the T3, the tocotrienol, along with cancer. That's amazing. That is all faded. And
then, so there's only one trial in the U.S., in University of Southern Florida in Tampa, and that oncologist is studying, GI tract oncologist is studying pancreatic cancer, the deadliest of all cancer.
Right,
that one.
Right.
The other 4 done in Denmark. We have about 6-7 trials. Sometimes you have to repeat them, and the 4 cancers are ovarian cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer, and colon cancer. And without a doubt, lung cancer is the worst of the highest people of all. So those are the 4 we're doing in Denmark: lung, colon, breast, ovary cancer. Those 4. I wish I can do liver cancer and prostate cancer. We don't have that. And the one in Tampa is pancreatic cancer. So
is pancreatic cancer plus your annatto product? Is that what that study is in Tampa?
The Tampa one used pure delta tocotrienol. Now, in annatto, I didn't give you the composition. Remember, I say it's no tocopherol. If you run the peak, 90% delta and 10% gamma, the two most potent one. So one can say that it's almost all delta. In the Denmark study, they used the 300 milligram tocotrienol that you recommend to people exactly as is, no change, like that. The one in Tampa, because they got the grant from the National Cancer Institute in the US, they use pure delta tocotrienol.
And how did they do that? Was he someone that knew of your work, or how did the principal investigator do that?
Okay, they use our annatto tocotrienol as a starting point, and then they use a company. They do decoction. They systematically strip off everything else, so there's a pure delta tocotrienol drug. But the delta tocotrienol is from annatto. But since then, they have approached us directly. If and when they
did you meet him at a party, or did you bump into him, or how did you guys connect?
About 20 years ago, he just emailed me. He saw our research and said that I think that you are making the substance we want. So like that. And so now,
when something's meant to be, it just is. Okay.
So right now we are very gung-ho. And the first of all of those trials clearly is ovarian cancer. It is and allowing stage 4 cancer patient. In other words, for those who are on placebo, no, not placebo, by the way. They have to take standard of care drug, which is a anti-angiogenesis drug. It's just slipped my mind the name of it. It's well-known drug. And then they take the same standard of care drug plus tocotrienol. That's all it is. So
they're adding the annatto 300 milligrams to the standard of care.
Yes. So just the two groups, they cannot have a non-drug taking,
right,
because
that wouldn't be
ethical like that. So in doing that, after 6 months, the one that are on standard of care, they are not around. It's over like that. They do not live, because it's stage 4. And for the one...
So stage 4, for those of you who don't know, most of you know, it means it's traveled outside the primary tumor and the patient is fighting for their life. It's metastatic cancer. So it's stage 4.
And they sometimes use the word they're under palliative care. They're suffering with a lot of pain. So I'm very sensitive to this, and I do not trouble the oncologist. Whatever the result is, I just want to know, does it help or does it not help? And then for those who take standard of care and tocotrienol, and 60% of them were still surviving after 6 months, and 25%, 1 in 4 still surviving after 2 years. Then I said, wow. And then in that country, the nurses have a lot of power. So when the study completed, so that means it stopped. But the nurses said, you can't stop giving it to the patient just because the study stopped. I have no say in it. So they say that, can we continue to give? Hey, you do whatever. We'll just continue to provide.
So the patients that are 2 years out, because of the phenomenal nurses that they have in the Netherlands, they recommended that the patients continue taking the T3, and they have.
Yeah, and even though the study have completed.
Okay.
Yes, and so right now.
And you have that documented, right? Even though it's not a study, the nurses say we told them to keep taking it, and they're still purchasing it. I wonder, because some things, like we're learning that estrogen, if you just had it for a year or two, protects your breasts for the next 20 years. So I didn't know if annatto 300, if you took it for a while, would be protective even though you were off of it, or whether you need to continue taking it to maintain that protection. Can you address that, please?
Yeah, I think that one here, we don't have it documented in the study because the editor won't allow that. The editor said that, what did you do? What are the results? And what are your conclusions? So we just have that black and white. We just know that from interactions with them. And right now we are designing the study better on the ovarian cancer. God willing, by the end of this year, the breast cancer study will be complete. And usually they are more formal people, not like you and I, very animated. So he doesn't like me to ask questions before the study is over. Like that's why I said, no problem. You just do what you need to do. We will patiently wait. We work with them, Dr. Percy, we have worked with them for almost 10 years. So this is a slow train coming. So the train comes and you have the data out. What is there not to like? This is a natural compound, and we're making. And by the way, these are stage 4 cancer patients. So they are taking 300 milligram 3 times a day at breakfast, lunch, dinner. Now, this is not to say that if you're a stage 4 cancer patient, then please do that. Breakfast, lunch, dinner.
300 milligrams
300
TID,
milligram
breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
TID, yes.
And the meal should have some fat in it, so you release the digestive players that help you absorb fat, because this is a fat-soluble product.
Yeah, this is exactly what the patient are doing. However, I'll now go back to the pancreatic cancer. That professor did animal study, the dose escalate, and they did all kinds of things. And then when they do clinical trial, they found out dose escalation, meaning that they gave a group of patients 200 milligram, another group of patients 400, 800, 1600, and 3200, believe it or not. So when he did above 800 milligrams, they did not see any additional benefit. That does not necessarily immediately conclude that more is not better because it didn't work on the cancer thing. But there are other things. When you give so much, the gut simply cannot absorb, and most of them are pooped off. It's just too much as big slug. So right now he titrated it. It appears to me the active dose that are not stage 4 cancer patients, that are perhaps stage 2 and 3, like that, is somewhere between 400 to 600 milligrams. That's my best guess. And so for people who are stage 1 and 2, probably for maintenance dose, if the cancer is in control, perhaps 300. Look, it is not a drug. The thing is not terribly expensive. So if I take it because I have genetic hypercholesterolemia. You're looking at me, 5'4", 125 pound. I take about 300 to 450 milligram just to control my LDL not overly oxidized, and my C-reactive protein is low, and my cholesterol did not drop dramatically, only about 5-10%, because my cholesterolemia is genetic hypercholesterolemia, not dietary hypercholesterolemia. So I'm good with that. So God willing, I will have continued health. My cardiologist say I'm fine. So,
well, is your coloring, and not everybody can see you, so not everybody's looking at this on YouTube, but your coloring is phenomenal. I tell a lot. My ex used to be an ER doc, and he'd say a patient would walk in and there'd be the look. If they just had the look, he knew they were in trouble. And part of that look was color. Because when you're getting white, you're getting grayish. This is not good. And the better someone's color is, the better their circulation is. And as Dr. Moncrief used to say to me when I worked with him in the dialysis center, circulation is life. And your color is phenomenal. Do you think that's partially from taking the Annatto 300 for so many years? Because your color is amazing.
I want to say one of the studies we have done, and did not pursue much, what we found is that Tocotrienol helps in vascularizing the 30,000 miles of artery in a human body. Can you imagine that? Each of us have 30,000 miles that's circulating the globe 6 times. Like that. So that is how much arteries we have. So it helps in increasing nitric oxide, so you can vascularize. It prevent oxidation of LDL, so it doesn't become oxidized and begin to form plaque. It also helps in inhibiting adhesion molecules that help it have Velcro effect and stick to the artery, and then things begin to happen.
So it reduces fibrinogen and fibrin activity?
That we only have done one study on it, platelet aggregation. So if it relates to platelet aggregation and thromboxane, then like that. But it doesn't work exactly like the way coumadin works. how vitamin K causes clotting and coumadin remove the clotting. Not exactly like that, but it does it by preventing the platelet not to aggregate when you have a tear in your artery, and then this clot would form right there. So it prevents the clotting. So it probably would be good with people who have deep vein thrombosis. They sit in the plane for long periods of time, like that kind. So
are there any contraindications? Like if someone's on blood thinners, like the Coumadin, the old type of blood thinner, but the newer type of blood thinners, are there any contraindications where people can't take this?
Excellent question. That has been done. That has been asked in 2 studies. The one that is doing in pancreatic cancer in Florida did that because he was only. I did not tell you the in between thing. He was only able to give the pancreatic cancer patient tocotrienol for 14 days. Why so short? Because people with pancreatic cancer cannot wait. Once you get big, I don't know if you're aware, pancreatic cancer is the most deadliest and virulent of all cancer. So once you do this, so his window of opportunity is only 14 days. And at 14 days, they're on his operation table to remove the thing. So he
like
worried.
The Whipple procedure.
Yeah. So when he did that procedure, he wanted to know if the tocotrienol would not help the wound to heal. It's an indirect question to what you asked.
Right. I hear what you're
saying.
Then
the wound won't heal. Then he worries about that. So he did that. And I remember he told me this. On all surgery, there must be an assistant surgeon there. But he worked very hard to not make a mistake, so he does not have to employ the use of the, because then the thing is reproducible and not the FDA saying, sorry, it is blame on the tocotrienol. And to date, whether he used a low 200 milligram or the highest 3.2 grams, 3,200 milligram, there are no lengthening of a clotting factor or bleeding factor, nada.
So in other words, if someone's on blood thinners, they can take this.
They can, to the best of my knowledge, they can do this. But the
reason that they say this is because they don't want the blood to thin and then not to be able to have coagulation and have the wound to heal. And you're saying they didn't see any problems with any of the dosing from 200 to 3,200 milligrams. There was no changes in wound healing on these pancreatic surgical patients.
No problems on that. And in all the cancer patient study with the 900 milligram, nothing happened. And we have seen no such report on our clinical trials in the 300 milligram and 600 milligram on the metabolic syndrome cluster. None like this. So I'm very comfortable with the safety profile of tocotrienol. We have received GRAS affirmation. So GRAS means GRAS, generally recognized as safe, a term
the GRAS list
by the FDA.
We're not talking about marijuana. We're just talking about the GRAS list.
Yes. I don't know how much time we have left. If you would allow me, I would like to segue a little bit on the other molecule that I've been working with in the last.
I think we're going to have to get you back on the show for this.
Okay, no problem.
We've gone away, and there was just something I wanted to. The one other final question. Yeah, I want to have you back because we want to hear about your other work, but we're already at an hour here, and unless people are walking around that lake twice. But you mentioned that this was a nitric oxide booster, and as we age, we make less nitric oxide, and nitric oxide keeps our blood vessels healthy. And the number one cause really of death of many of us is related to coronary vascular heart disease. So, but the way Viagra works, I just got to ask this question, is that it really boosts nitric oxide. That is one of the ways with men with erectile dysfunction get a benefit from the blue pill. So have you seen, and of course I thought that the plant looked a little bit like a vagina, so this is a great segue for that. We're getting kind of colorful here. So have you seen or heard of any male patients on this with erectile dysfunction have improvement?
Not with the tocotrienol. It's interesting you make the connection between nitric oxide, the increasing of vascularization in the penis is more on the GCMP, that group of enzyme, than the nitric oxide. It may assist, but I did not hear any report. Interestingly enough, when you interview me the next time with this compound, geranol, GG, I have heard of people reporting that.
Well, stay tuned. We're going to hear some. But you're just saying, but annatto-E does boost nitric oxide production. I didn't get that.
That is right? Correct. That is correct.
Which is a very it's a youthful promoting molecule. It does keep us healthier and it keeps circulation going.
100%.
This has been exciting, and you answered so many questions, and you're so articulate and passionate and colorful too. It was great having you on the show. This is his book. It's called The Truth About Vitamin E, and not everybody can see it because some of you are just listening to this show. We are going to have links to his website and to this book. And we're going to summarize, of course, the show notes, what we discussed. So don't forget to go to drlindseyberkson.com and click on podcasts. And when we publish the show, there's show notes underneath. And don't forget, this is on many platforms. It's on Spotify. It's on Google. It's on Apple Play. It's on multiple iTunes. So you can tune into this, and don't forget to subscribe to iTunes, because then every time a new show comes up, you'll just have it downloaded on your phone and you can listen to it while you're just hanging out with friends, or you're just zoning out on the couch, or whatever you want to do. This kind of a conversation is so enlightening as to what this is. Decades of work of Dr. Tan's. Decades of work and passion and caring, and the fateful trip to the Amazon that brings us a product that might be an answer or a help for a loved one or yourself. It's quite extraordinary, and we're really lucky that you spent time with us today, and that you're such an adorable and intelligent. You're all of that. I can't wait to have you back on the show again. You know, Dr. Eddie Maristani that I work with in Naples, he told me all about you and said, and he gave, when something pops up on the phone, it's a little shocking here. And he told me all about you. And then we had this book, and then he nudged me about a week ago. He said, you got to have him on the show. You just got to have him on the show. This guy's incredible. And you delivered. So we're going to set up another time to hear the rest of your work, because I'm sure it's amazing. But thank you so much for all this decades of elbow grease. Thank you so much for all your hard work.
As I end, let me make one very simple and short remark. I am an immigrant to this country, and very grateful for my years of living in the United States. Most of my life have been in Massachusetts, for a few years in Alabama. There are many opportunities for me to make this product in Asia and elsewhere cheaper. But I want the audience to know, for this immigrant, I made this product in Massachusetts, in United States of America, and I'm proud of that. So I want the audience to know it's done well. It's done here in our own home country, and it's delivering to our own people. So if that is of any blessing to you or comfort to you.
It is, because it's just like the pandemic showed us, we don't know who to trust anymore. We don't know who to trust with information. We don't know who to trust with authorities. And many products that are made overseas, we don't totally know who to trust. So that you added that caveat. Now, we are going to have a link in the show notes of how you can get this product if you want to get it. Don't forget that. And I'm going to talk with Dr. Tan a little bit more to see what we can do for our listeners. But that makes a big difference. That was a lovely way to put a conclusion.
Thank you. And thank you to all your listeners.
So wonderful meeting you, and I hope we get you back on the show again. And I'm not just saying that, and I love that we've got the tocopherol and T3 molecules behind you. And I didn't get to see your other love of your life, your wife, but I look forward to seeing her perhaps on the next show. Thank you again, and be well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.